Yes, welcome back, friends. Today we'll be talking on yoga. Rather than today, from today onwards, we'll be talking on yoga because yoga is a very vast subject. So it talks about lifestyle, it talks about food, it talks about discipline, it talks about mind, it talks about spirituality, it talks about many things. So you cannot compile everything into one session as such. So that is the reason why today onwards we'll be speaking more on yoga, and later we'll function. We'll talk about other functionalities as such. So I would like to give you a different perspective on yoga because you might have heard about yoga as control. You might have heard about yoga as connection. Might have heard yoga as linking and many things. But moreover, the important thing is yoga is more about experience. It's awareness. It's what makes yoga different than rest of the other things around us. You know, to bring this, I would like to get your attention in a lighter way about today's modern scientific community to that of the traditional science of how rishis and munis were there. So today, when we say about scientists, you need to have some categories like that of gray hairs, like that of too much having written theses down, like that of having sophisticated language of understanding. Similarly, if I take to the other side of the spectrum, it is entirely different. First of all, nobody was having much of a gray hairs. So they were pretty much young in their nature when they actually could found out something different. At the same time, majority of them or the way they used to communicate was with, let's say, stories rather than sophisticated literature. It was stories, it was songs, it was sung by many people around them. Similarly, they were accessible to people across. So it was not like they are science of only medicine and they were only to target to medical community, but they could target to any community because of their way to approach it, or way to bring that into perspective. So that is the reason why today's scientists and the traditional science, though they had done a lot of things, but the traditional science could actually connect till date. One such example is our understanding about Trimurtis. The common Trimurtis are Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar. So these three people had exemplary way of personifying Indian culture, because Brahma is, we know, is the knowledge, and with her or with him was Saraswati. The knowledge is epitome of knowledge. That's what I can say. Similarly, we have Vishnu. To continue to protect, we need wealth, and that is seen as Lakshmi. And Shiva, the destroyer, to make his anger cool down, he needed strength. So that was through Shakti or Parvati. But this was only in the form of story. But today's science talks about the same language about creation, about maintenance and destruction through something called as quantum mechanics. So the depth of quantum was something was as common to us as we knew. At the same time, the theory of evolution was also in a similar way. Amphibians to something what we call as Homo sapiens was very similar to that of Matsya Kurma Varaha till what we know as Kalki. So basically, there is some kind of a connotation. I'm not telling that is true, but there is something which is connecting the traditional science and today's modern science in a larger way. Probably the reason one is both of these other side spectrum are actually trying to get themselves involved in a much deeper and trying to question. See, yoga is also more about questioning. You question about your existence, you question about something which is not under your understanding. Similarly, the science is also coming up the same way, questioning, unrelentless questioning about each other's way of getting the knowledge. This is the reason why yoga clearly states that there is nothing in this world which is not has been answered, which cannot be curtailed by this human brains. So that is the reason why it has to be more important. You start questioning your own things. So you are deceased. Why are you deceased? What was the reason for you to get deceased? Don't question about big things like God, or don't question about things like existence of this life, but try questioning the smaller aspects which is more important for us right now. And probably you'll try to understand better the functioning of this world. That's what yoga ultimately tells us about. So traditionally it dates back to 5,000 years. Well, we can see yoga yoga being there in Shiva Samhita, it's there in Vedas, it's there in Upanishads, it's there in many of our stories and all the things. But if you try to sort it out, it try to get into it, we can only talk about it, but we will not find the first source of yoga as such. That is the reason why we had philosophy which addressed this in a very different way. But today our focus is not on the traditional parts of yoga. Our aim today is to talk on its modern effect in today's life. Probably we'll cover the other chapters as in day comes by. So today, modern day recognizes yoga into these four forms. One is Ashtanga yoga, one is Hatha yoga, one is integrative approach in yoga therapy. Another one is stream of yoga. So streams of yoga is basically how you would like to connect your system, let's say the body, the mind, to something which is doing. So like your work, like your people around you, like anything which you love. So let's say the mother and the child example. Whatever does the child, whether it is good, bad, ugly, ultimately the mother feels the similarity, the mother feels the love for that child. So that is the reason why we say that's the ultimate love which you can feel. So that is what bhakti talks about. There is an entire way of expressing yourself, and once you do that with your own self, uh, that comes to be known as bhakti. So you're getting to link your body, your mind with that emotion. Then we call it as bhakti. Similarly, you are trying to linking this body, this mind with the ways of life. Let's say you are working and for you work is more important than anything else, then we call you as a karma yogi. Similarly, you try to question, like a scientist, you try to try to question the existing of people around you, try to question your own existence, try to question everything around you, like a lawyer. Then you become something like a jnana yogi. But if you try to understand what body is, how did this come, how did this venture, what am I doing, and then trying to understand something beyond this body. So is it something which I can able to do, like that of pranic healing techniques and all those things, and you're trying to evolve your body into a major responsibility or a major factor which can lead to a lot of goodness around you, then we call it as Raja Yoga, and you as a Raja Yogi. So these are the streams which are there and which people are practicing across. So similarly, as a doctor, what we do is we try to approach your body in an integrated way of how to make sure that all these things come in one branch or one way of handling your mental, physical, and social well-being. But similarly, there are other things which are not considered medical, but at the same time, they are also practiced, like Hatha Yoga, which has been practiced throughout the world through form of asanas. Ashtanga Yoga is another way of looking at it, where you don't have asanas as such, but it is more focused onto how your body is being placed and how well your body is reactive to the environmental factors. So as I said, Ashtanga Yoga is more about how you try to make your inner sense more happier, or let's say inner environment more happier with the help of your external environment. Because Ashtanga, as the name suggests, it is 8 steps to get into the happiness source of your life. How it is done? Basically, it targets from the external way and then slowly moves inwards. So when I say yama, it is how are you keeping your environment? So how much truth are you speaking? How much virtuous you are, and all those things. And slowly it comes to niyama. How have you kept your body? When I say body, cleanliness. When I say body, it talks about its way of doing things and how well you're interested in getting to know about this body as such. Then when the external environment and the internal environment are very well linked and they're working in unison, then your body will not have any kind of a trouble. That is the reason why we call it as asana. Asana is not just bending or twisting and turning. If you sit in a particular position for more than 30 minutes and there is no aches, there is no pains, there is no kind of a tension in your body muscles, that means that you have attained a perfect asana. So Ashtanga tells that if the external environment, internal environment is good, then the body will obviously become good. Once your body becomes good, the energy flows across without any kind of a tension. Energy will flow. That is the reason why we are living. I think I have told this, or I have actually made a video on this, which is called as pranayama. Have a look at it to understand more in depth. So pranayama is how the prana flows without any hindrances. What happens when there is no hindrances for the energy to flow across? then all your senses, all your way you're actually perceiving this world will work in its most and finest way. Today, the problem is our senses are there, but we are using it only for the sake of it. We see what we see, but we are not observing. We hear what we want to hear, but we are not actually critically looking or hearing all the things which are being said, or we are not able to receive all the things which are being said. The same time, we feel, I mean, the best example is the food. If there is no salt, if there is salt, that is the only difference. When there is no salt, you can taste other things. But when there is too much of salt, then you only taste salt in your food. Try this. Just don't put salt to your regular food stuff. Like, let's say chutney, which needs salt. Without salt, you can can sense the coconut smell. You can sense the smell of probably the green chilies, pudina, or even anything else which you have put in your chutney. So that is how the sense of the taste is also being marginalized by salt. So like this, even the touch, you won't feel much the changes what happens in the environmental factors. You just feel the touch when somebody hits you and touches you, but you generally don't feel it as such. So your senses, once this asana and this energy is moving across your body is heightened, then slowly your senses will be more, what you can say is adaptive. You can feel the changes, you can be more receptive. When that happens, then you move on to something called as dharana, where with the help of these senses, you try to make sure that there is no much of a hindrances for your so-called meditative body or the mind to flow across, because that is more important. Why do you want something to be more heightened? When we say heightened, it is not in a negative sense. It is means that they are more sensitive to appreciate small changes. Once that happens, your awareness expands. Once your awareness expands, you can ultimately gather more information around you. You can gather more, you can be more absorptive in nature. And that is what we call as samadhi. So Ashtanga Yoga talks about externally moves internally, whereas Hatha Yoga moves internally to the externally. So today, as I said, everybody talks about yoga, everybody talks about asana, but technically it is not the same. In Hatha Yoga text, you have only 12 asanas to be mastered. So you pick any one and try to gain popularity, or trying to make sure that your body is fixed to that one asana as such. But unfortunately, today's yoga has become more like a gymnasium. So it is not a blame, but if we try to understand where this came from, it is having a very good, interesting story. It's dated back to the kings of Mysore and Patabi Jois as such. One of the greatest minds in yoga, he introduced dynamism in traditional yoga. When he introduced dynamism yoga, it was to make sure that the kings of the Mysore kingdom were actually much more healthy, were much more ease of doing their things, or much more focused onto them, onto their practices, or onto their kingsmanship. So that is the reason why Pattabhi Jois introduced gymnasm or dynamism in today's yoga. So that took on to everyone around them, and slowly only dynamism changed, but the intricate details of yoga was lost. But technically, Hatha Yoga talks about internally how you can keep your body such that you can practice, take any of these 12, take one asana and try to master it. When that happens, the energy will flow. As I said, in pranayama, the movement of energy can be seen. Similarly, you can cleanse off the external orifices such that your prana, when it is flowing, it can be tamed or it can be controlled. So when there is a lot of energy which is moving across your body, you have to tame it so that you can channelize it. So what happens when you channelize it? You can understand the reality of this body. You can absorb the energy such that the entire cosmos as such, the energy can be absorbed or experienced. So Hatha Yoga talks about internally managing your body so that you can understand the entire universe, whereas Ashtanga talks about the external causes to make sure that your internal is not hindered. So there is a lot of things which is going on. So if Ashtanga is heads, Hatha Yoga is tail. So this is always the flip side of the coin. So that is the reason why we come in as doctors trying to understand what is actually happening with you. So this Panchakosha theory comes down to some of the Upanishads what we have, talks about the way the body has been described or what body is made up of. So basically body is made up of 5 layers. First is Annamaya Kosha. As the name suggests, Anna is the food. So that is the basis of a human existence. Then he has Pranamaya Kosha. Like I have been telling, it is made up of energy systems. Once that is covered, then we have Manomaya Kosha, where let's say the balance of Anna and Prana can be seen in Mana. So if you have a good balance of Annamaya, if you have a good balance of Pranamaya, then your mind is more relaxed and it is more, functionally it is better. Once that mind is more functioning better, then you have great intelligence to understand what is actually happening. So if you are reading for an exam, you have to have your stomach full, you have to have your energies full. You cannot be lousy and try to study. Once your body and your mind, that is the reason why we say get up early in the morning, because you're fit. The same time, the mind is also awake because the energy flowing is happening at its most. When that happens, you can recollect faster. Vijnanamaya kosha is in full movement. Once that happens, obviously you can give an exam and then you can achieve to Anandamaya Kosha. Very simple way of telling you what exactly is the way at which body functions. So the problem can happen anywhere. It can happen in Vijnanamaya Kosha, it can happen in Annamaya Kosha. So we as doctors try to change this problem in the koshas such that you function as a better entity. How do we do it? There are a few things which yoga talks about and what we can experience in the body. The first and foremost is the physiological changes, the blood circulation, the chemical circulation that is happening in your body, and also the hormones which are there in your system. So these things can be taken care by our asana, pranayama, and dhyana. When that happens, then slowly you try to understand your body well. So this is your limitations. You have to move around these limitations. You have to move away from these limitations. Then you have an approach which is very positive in nature. Then you try to tell yourself that this is a good change, which I have seen. Like for example, people who are losing weight, they do initially have a lot of problems in doing yoga. Slowly they see that because of their regular practice in asana, regular practice in pranayama, regular practicing in dhyana, they see that they have a lot of changes in your system. Once that comes, then you will make sure that you do it in a repetitive way because it is rewarding for you. When that happens, then you find this rewarding as an intention, or we can say a kind of a incentive for you to work for a more betterment of this physical body. Then this becomes as a repeated cycle. The same thing can be found in yoga also. Regular asana, regular pranayama can lead you to a more better way of meditativeness, because the flow of prana and the body is able to handle the strains which it experiences. That leads to dharana, where you are actually able to feed yourself up that yes, this is the right way of doing. Then you try to understand this cyclic movement of your body, mind, and energy levels. That will lead to love with the way you are doing it. That is the reason why people are very happy. They're not worried about the strains and stresses of it. So this is how yoga actually solves majority of your problems. It starts with your physiological or the physical level, slowly moves into your mind and changes the entire perception of yoga or of body as such. But not just practicing asana is also important. You need to understand the way the energy is. I have made a video of prana. I have made a video on how the prana moves in your body. You can have a look at it. At the same time, it is more important that you need to understand about the food as such. Why food? Because food is a very important source for any kind of a physical nature. Food is one most important thing which is actually, makes a physical structure as such. So there are a lot of items which are there when we talk about food. Yoga classifies foods into 4 sections: tamasika, rajasika, sattvika, and nirguna. So these gunas are the characteristics of food, how food can make or can give an impact to your life. So probably we'll talk about food in later sections as such. But the more important thing is food has to be considered, because food is the creation of the entire system of our body as such. What was once upon a time one cell organism is now 1 trillion cell organism. So all this happened because of food. So probably we'll talk about food in a different aspect as such. But whatever it is, whether you call it as an occult practice, whether you call it as a non-occult practice, the more important thing is the discipline. So once you say you are trying to practice it but you're not getting it, probably your way of doing things is not right. But whatever you do, you can just sit and just breathe. Like, you can just breathe for 5 minutes in a day, and that can have a lot of changes in your way. Everybody breathes, but what I'm talking about breathing is being more aware of the breath which is moving into your nostrils, breath which is coming out of your nostrils. If you're just focused on that, then probably majority of your disease as such will come down. You might be going to regular gym, you might be doing regular yoga, but how much of awareness are you giving to that particular functioning? In a 24 hours of a cyclic day, what is your awareness and how aware are you in your activity? It is just unconscious or subconsciously we are working out. That is the reason why we end up doing a lot of mistakes. So yoga never said this is right, this is wrong. Yoga is very much accepting both the extremes of a scale. It will accept the negativities, it will accept the positivities. But are we ready to accept that we are doing a mistake in our regular practice? Once that comes in, then slowly we'll develop a discipline in our system. Once the discipline comes, then you need not worry about disease as such, because when there is a discipline, the amount of disease is already reduced for a longer, larger quantity as such. So that is the reason why yoga never says this is right, this is wrong. Yoga never talks about what is bad and what is wrong. It only talks about how well are you into the system of understanding. So I hope today you understood about yoga and different aspects of it. So we will be talking more about yoga. We'll be talking more about other elements or other structures of yoga, trying to understand how it is more evident, trying to understand how it is more utilized, trying to understand how we can put more of these aspects into our day-to-day activities so that we don't fall ill, one, so that we understand our body well, two, and three, we try to understand the existence itself. It is, and it will be possible. Only thing is if we are able to take a little strain to understand these things. So that's all for today's session. So in the coming sessions, we'll be obviously practicing yoga also.